Alright, so Season 2 of Shield Hero is over. This covered Book 9 in 2 episodes. They really blew through it, and I was pretty disappointed, honestly. I actually thought the season might have 13 episodes after they used 4 for Book 8, and that would allow us to have 3 episodes with Book 9 and kind of wrap it up at the same pace it was all season, but they really cranked through this last one. Let's get into how the book is pretty different from the show, obviously, since they crammed it in the way they did. If you're already here, go ahead and like and subscribe and all that shit. Alright, let's go. Book 9 starts with Naofumi and Lark bickering about nicknames and fighting one of the waves in Kazuna's world. Pretty much every book starts with a prologue where Naofumi introduces all the characters that we already know. And we get Naofumi kind of hanging around their town for a few days and getting familiar with it. He has some more interactions with Romina, the armorer in this world. Naofumi does some crafting and they talk about the waves, and this is where the businessman Alto shows up. Alto kind of functions as an informant since he's a merchant for them, since he's Kazuna's acquaintance, in the same way that the slave trader knows Naofumi, where Naofumi clearly doesn't trust him, but he's useful. And the real reason that he came to talk to them wasn't to be friendly with Kazuna, which is what he says. He came to learn about the soul healing water from Naofumi. And this is all in the book, obviously, so this is stuff that got skipped in the show. Therese in the book has kind of a crush on Naofumi, and Lark has a crush on Therese. But Therese has a crush on Naofumi because she's a jewel, and he creates really powerful accessories for her. And it's really funny because Lark obviously likes her. She just really looks up to Naofumi for his skills. So he also makes Kazuna a lure, L-U-R-E, like a fishing lure. And he puts a gem on the sheath for Raftalia that gives her the ability that you see in the show. And allows her to go really fast for a few seconds if she has it sheathed for a certain amount of time. I've mentioned this in my other Shield Hero videos, but I really like how they focus on his crafting and his, merchant business side in the books a lot. It's a really big part of his character. In the show, they've kind of rushed through it to get to the action stuff. Especially with the way that this season was time constrained. So they all train and learn from each other and practice techniques and stuff. And we find out here that Ethnobolt is really weak in combat, even though he's really smart. So he's kind of like Rishia. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher all the fucking names. So they're all kind of weird names or Japanese names. So yeah, I'll just go ahead and say sorry now. Ethnobolt's issue is that the rabbit race don't gain power even when they level up. And Naofumi acts like kind of a dick in this scene and tells him it's up to him whether or not he gets stronger. And this is pretty typical for book Naofumi. And it motivates Ethnobolt to join them in their training. So Naofumi sort of does the thing in the books a lot where he acts like a dick, but he's doing it for good reasons. This is pretty typical behavior for him. And, I get that people would probably think this stuff was boring if it was in the show, but this character stuff is what makes the action scenes have weight. I like all the world building and all the character development stuff that kind of gets left out, especially in this season. The next chapter is about the fishing lure that he made for Kazuna, and she spent all night fishing. And we find out more about Ethnobolt here, who's actually only 15, and a library rabbit species where they live in the labyrinth libraries, and they're fighting monsters and leveling up. And Lark's group is happy with Naofumi's accessories because their weapons are all a lot stronger now. And they accidentally find out that the fishing lure that Naofumi made draws monsters to them. And they had to fight Kazuna for it because she loves fishing so much. And it's like her prized possession now. And there's a funny little scene here where they camp and all the demi-humans and the familiars and stuff surround Naofumi at night because monsters like him. And Raftalia gets annoyed because Naofumi's constantly petting Rafchan. In the show, they have Yomogi attack them in the town in the middle of the day. But in the book, they get attacked by her at night at Kazuna's house. It's a nice little detail that Naofumi's accessory on his shield gives him a counterattack after people break the accessory. So obviously it only works once, but it's just a nice little thing that they put in. Yomogi is pretty powerful in the book, and the battle gets drawn out for a while, and Naofumi eggs her on by talking shit about Keogh and stuff. And they get the sword out of her hand when it starts acting weird, pretty much like they did in the show. But it wraps itself around her, and it sucks her blood out, and she has no control, and the sword takes over. And Kazuna attacks the sword, which she can do because it's not technically human. So here in the book, the castle of the country gets attacked right after this, and they actually tie Yomogi up, and Naofumi shoves a dirty rag in her mouth so she can't bite her tongue off before they can torture her. Naofumi sends her a party invite as a joke because they're about to portal to the castle, but she actually accepts it. And this part is something that they really sped through in the show, which is a pretty big downer because it makes a lot more sense in the book. In the show, she attacks them, they're nice to her, and then she pretty much immediately accepts that Keogh tried to blow her up right away and betrayed her. In the book, she wants to go to the castle because she can't believe that Keogh would use her as a distraction or that he actually tried to kill her. So she's kind of like in denial, which I think is more reasonable. Naofumi makes a deal with her that when she sees the truth, she'll tell them everything she knows. And Naofumi tells Glass that if she tries anything weird, just go ahead and kill her. And he's just awesome in the book. I love how ruthless he is, even when he's just doing it to be a dick. They use the Ofuda, which are their world's little magic paper card things, and they use it like a slave crest in Naofumi's world, and they put it on her so that she can't run away or attack him or anything. The castle is being attacked by people who are using swords like the one that Yomogi had, and led by Sagumi. Sagumi was a part of the harem that the guy that Raptalia cut in half. In the show right here, the waves start. Kazuna's group gets teleported away immediately. And then Ethnobolt takes Naofumi's group to Kyo's house with Yomogi, and this is where they run into the guy's harem led by Sagumi. And these are the half-tiger, half-human women monster things that are pretty strong. In the show, they just kind of fuck them up. But in the book, I actually like how it goes because it's really fleshed out and it's a lot more important. In the book, Yomogi tries to talk Sagumi and her group out of fighting, and this is kind of what turns her against Keogh. And it's a huge chaotic fight with a bunch of these women from Keogh and all of Naofumi and Kazuna's groups. And Naofumi turns to the Shield of Wrath again. In the book, it's a pretty big risk for him every time. Like, anytime that he even wields it, he's kind of endangering himself to giving into his rage. These women are pretty powerful because they have exploding weapons, like the one that Yomogi had, combined with their half-tiger bodies. And their weapons, some of them are replica hero weapons from Naofumi's world. He notices one of them is Modeyasu's spear, and they use the attack that the Cardinal used last season. But a nice little detail that we get in the book is that Kazuna can actually attack their beast half and like cut it off of their body because that part of them is not human. And then when she separates them, they try to heal all of them. They don't just kill them. Still going with the book, Keo betrays Sagumi and her group. So right as Naofumi and his group are trying to separate the weapons from these women, they hear Keo's voice start talking through the weapon, and he betrays Sagumi and her group, and he essentially initiates their self-destructs, and she realizes that he betrayed her as well. So Sagumi and Yomogi both now realize that they've been betrayed by Keogh. Naofumi seals himself inside a shield prison with Sagumi, and absorbs the monster spear into his shield. And then after this, Kazuna runs around cutting up the beast parts of all the women. And then the rest of them just kind of surrender after realizing they were betrayed. And the women with Sagumi who surrender go around and gather up the other women who were attacking and tell them all the same thing, that they were betrayed and they need to surrender and stop attacking. So then Naofumi and his group teleport back to the Dragon Hourglass because he suspects that that was what their actual target was all along. And he ends up being right, because Keogh wanted to create Return Dragon Vein for everybody so that he could send a military right into their capital. Yomogi was a distraction to delay them from the Beast Women, who were supposed to take the Hourglass, but obviously they resolved it before it worked out for Keogh. And just to give a little bit of perspective here of how much was skipped in the show, this is the halfway point of the book. Like on the Kindle, this is the exact 50% point. So they're nursing Sagumi back to health, and this is where he gets the Barbaroi armor. And obviously none of this is in the show because they really fucking crank through it. I mean, you saw the armor, but, you know, him hanging out in the shops and talking to people and all the different equipment and all that, they really gloss over it. This is where Yomogi turns on Keogh, and we learn his backstory and all that stuff that they showed in episode 11. And they go get their armor from Romina, and he finds out that it's really powerful, but it's cursed. Raptalia gets a new Miko outfit, and Naofumi really likes the way that she looks in those, so he keeps trying to get her to wear them all the time. And this goes on even when they go back to his world. And in the next chapter, she made 2 katanas from the materials from their great spirit animals in their world that were killed. Raftalia can wield 2 swords at once. She has the ability to wield 2 swords at once, just not effectively. They mentioned being concerned that waves in Lark's world would pull Raftalia from Naofumi's world back to Lark's because she's the vassal weapon hero of this world now, but they kind of just put it off for later. They get a bunch of equipment and go to take Ethnobalt's boat as far as they can towards Keogh's laboratory. They have a discussion about spirits and souls and stuff, and Naofumi figures out what Keogh is trying to research. And essentially what he figures out is that he's trying to put people's souls into other bodies to try to make them immortal. So in the book, they travel for 3 days before they get to Keogh's lab, and it's hidden in this magical maze of fog, so it's hard to find. And Yomogi has a bell that's supposed to navigate it, but Keogh changed it so it doesn't work now. Raftalia and Rafchan are able to navigate the boat because they're really good at illusion magic. They walk into the courtyard, and in the book, it's Kazuna's group and Naofumi, so there's like 10 of them. And the first thing they run into are more of these beast people, but these are insane and too far gone to be saved. So they run into the mansion, and Ethnobalt flies away to distract the monsters, even though he's really weak. And Yomogi has a key to his lab that also doesn't work because Keogh changed that too. So Lark just starts cutting through the doors. It's funny because at this point, Yomogi's like completely turned on him, but as they're breaking these doors down, she keeps muttering things like, if he's innocent, you guys better pay to repair that door. They're making their way to the lab, and Kazuna cuts down some monsters, and Keogh has some traps laid out, like guillotine blades and rolling balls of iron and like movie stuff. They run into some sane monster women, and the monster women ask them to stop or Albert will be killed. And Albert is the wielder of the mirror vassal weapon. Everyone thought that he was already dead because he's been kidnapped for so long. He's kind of disappeared, so he was assumed dead. They get deep enough into the lab that the weapons stop exploding because Keogh doesn't want to blow up his own facilities, so they know they're getting close. And what Keogh had created were a bunch of homunculi, which are essentially artificially created humans. And this is where they run into the zombie of trash number 2, the guy that Raftalia cut in half. And they see the mirror vassal weapon holder at the end of the hallway in like a special tank. Raftalia says that she can hear the mirror weapon, and it's asking for help because Albert has lost more than half of his soul, and he's essentially being tied to the weapon by force now. So Keogh pops up behind the tanks and zombies and stuff through the floor, and he has Spirit Tortoise Guardian familiars with him. And Naofumi says he was waiting for us with an army. And at this point, we're at about the 75% mark for the book. And obviously the rest of this is a huge battle, so I'm not going to go into a ton of detail about it. I would definitely recommend reading it because they're good reads. I definitely enjoyed it. But I can see why they wouldn't have, dedicated an entire episode to this big ass fight. We start off with Yomogi confronting Keogh, and he goes off on her and calls her a bitch and stuff. And then he sends all of the homunculi at them and uses the book weapon. He sends all of his attacks mainly prioritizing Rishia. And she has like another awakening moment where she says that she can't tolerate him any longer. And in the book, like I said, this is a massive battle because you've got like 10 people between Naofumi and Kazuna's parties, Yomogi, all the homunculi, Keogh. So there's really a lot going on here. So there's a pretty cool part in here where they get gravity attacked, and Naofumi uses the demon dragon shield he got earlier, and it shoots magic bullets as a counterattack. It's obviously not super effective, but he's just happy to have some kind of counterattack. So after a lot of fighting, they kill all the homunculi, and Keogh says that it was actually trash number 2 that made them, not him. And this fight goes on for a while, and Naofumi and Kazuna's parties are getting hurt, and Keogh starts ramping up his powers, and eventually the only one standing is Rishia, because the attack he does more damage based on how high your stats are, and her stats are dog shit. So she goes to attack, and he throws Albert in front of him, and she kills Albert, and a ball of light, which is like the mirror vassal weapon soul equivalent, floats away. Keogh tries to power up with the Spirit Tortoise power, and Naofumi's shield absorbs a lot of it, and his Spirit Tortoise heart shield comes out again. He can't use the beam, but he uses it to counteract the gravity field so they can fight better. And they prepare a bunch of attack buffs and stuff, and Yomogi says that if he surrenders, she'll make his death easy to Keogh. So I definitely like her a lot more as the book goes on. Keo does a move where a bunch of pages latch onto the Naofumi's shield, so he can't use like any of his abilities. He's kind of sucking his power out too. This part is pretty awesome in the books because this is where Keo summons the waves. So Kazuna's entire party gets teleported away suddenly in the middle of this big ass fight. And it's only Naofumi, Raftalia, Philo, Rishia, and Rafchan who have to fight Keo, who's like super powered now. And a really cool thing that they explain in the books in more detail is that when the waves are open, you combine the levels of the worlds that are connected. So Naofumi gets to combine his level from his previous world and this one. So now he's level 151. They flashed this in his vision very quickly in the show, but it definitely would have been easy to miss if you didn't already know it was there. Keo says that he could have had Naofumi teleported as well, but he wanted to keep him there to kill him. And he summons more guardians and stuff to fight him. And Naofumi's thinking to himself at this point that Rishia is powerful enough that she could probably defeat a hero because her level exceeds 100 with these combined levels. So she can really go all out with her abilities. And Keo is also super leveled up, so he's sending all these crazy ass attacks at him. And he traps them in this all black and white room where he compresses space. And in this room, they'll just be constantly attacked until they die. So Naofumi pulls out his Wrath Shield, which is like super powered now because his level is essentially doubled. And he puts his party in a shield prison and then lets his curse flames burn up the entire room to break through this compressed space. Keo keeps using really powerful moves, and Naofumi tries to use All Liberation Aura, but then the Shield of Wrath powers him up with the power of the Demon Dragon. And he chooses to power up Philo, but it ends up being All Sacrifice Aura, not All Liberation Aura. So it comes with a huge cost. Raftalia, Philo, and Naofumi get attacked by the Curse Flames as part of this. And Naofumi uses Iron Maiden to attack Keo, and it really fucks him up. And Keo gets pissed off and pulls out the equivalent of a Curse series, which is kind of what you saw at the very end of the show. They sort of just jump straight to it. And he uses Revelation, and Naofumi's Tortoise Shield powers up, so he can use it to fight him. And he's using the beam now, because when he first pulled out the Spirit Tortoise Shield, it was only at 20%, but then it jumps up to 100 at this part. And the Mirror Vassal Weapon Soul thing flies into Naofumi's shield, because he's losing this battle of like beam versus beam essentially. And when the Mirror Vassal Weapon flies into his shield, it gets overcharged up to 130%, so Naofumi is finally winning. And then Rishia throws a sword at Keo and hits him in the chest. And they kind of skip an important detail here, where the Book Vassal floats over a spot, and Naofumi finds another Keo body in a tank, and he sees a ghost-like figure with Rafchan's help, and it looks like a guy in his 30s, and this is Keo's soul. And Keo starts talking shit about being invincible, and he's going to go grab his other body that he had as a spare. And they all pull out like soul-based weapons and cut him down, and so they kill his soul. So he's like dead. And Naofumi figures out that a bunch of people were reincarnated here, not just the heroes. So this is a pretty big plot point, especially as the series progresses. So they destroy Keo's lab, and it hops over to the epilogue. Naofumi realizes that his stats have all dropped 30% for using All Sacrifice Aura. The mirror triggered a portal, and Kazuna's party walks through it. And Naofumi has 3 days left in this world, unlike the show where they pretty much have like 2 minutes. And they're all really grateful to him for using his curse weapon and like kind of fucking himself up to save their world and all that. And the doctor tells him that if he tries to use the cursed shield again before he's healed, he'll probably die. Also a pretty big detail. So they have a party and spend their last couple days hanging out and dicking around. And they say their goodbyes. Lark makes a little joke about Naofumi not treating the girls in his party like they're kids anymore. And he gets a couple little gifts from Ethno Ball that he says he thinks they'll be useful. And they go say bye to the merchant and Romina and Samugi and Yamogi and all of them. And then the book ends with them being back in their world. Pretty much what the show did there. And that's it for this one. That's it for this season, and that's it for this big-ass arc that was 4 books. They really blew through this last book. I was hoping it would be 13 seasons just to give it a little bit more time with the last book, but oh well, I guess. And it's really hard to have too much of an opinion on this as far as a comparison because, I mean, they just took a couple of highlights and blazed through it. And this might have been the least well done of this arc, which is pretty crazy considering the pace of this season. And the season started with them skipping over half a book. Overall, I thought the season was okay, but I was pretty disappointed. I think I might actually do a separate video where I talk about the season as a whole now that it's done. I'm not going to go too much into it here because this video is already gone kind of long. I just want to put it into perspective. The season 1 had 24 episodes, the first of which was 45 minutes, and it only covered 5 books. This season, which was 12 episodes, so less than half of the first one, covered 4 books. So, the pace was just insane. I hope that these budget issues or time constraints or whatever the problem was for season 3 are resolved. Like Shield Hero, from the book's perspective, for me is pretty solid all the way through. There's a couple of books later on that are a little bit more chill because, you kind of need a break from all the nearly dying all the time stuff and whatever. But, there's 22 books right now. I like all of them, and I would say maybe 2 of them are like, but the rest are good. So it's a little bit disappointing that they couldn't take a little bit more time with this, because I really think that even if they just had 15 episodes for this, like just an extra 3 episodes to spend a little bit of time on the world building and the explanations and the character development, I think it really would have went a long way. But I'll save that for a full season review. But yeah, overall, I really liked this arc in the books. So this was kind of a downer for me. The season was fine. I'd be curious to see what anime-only people think, because, you really get a lot of explanations and backstories, and it takes its time the first season. And this season is just like, go, go, go. Hopefully season 3, they'll slow down a bit, because there's a lot of really good shit in there, too. Alright, I'll just leave it at that for now. I'll make a full video later about the season. Alright, thanks. See ya.